Fiat 124 Spider Review. No matter what you think of how it came about or how it looks, the 124 Spider is a good idea. Fiat's lineup has been devoid of desirable froth for too long, and, at least from an enthusiast point of view, it's a shortfall that can't be made up with yet another 500 derivative or the return of the Tipo badge. Italy's flag carrier has been crying out for the marketing splash of something overtly sporty, and there are few more pleasing thoughts than the prospect of a small, affordable, two-seat, rear-drive roadster arriving on a manufacturer's forecourt. That is particularly so in the US, where the 124 is seen as key to Fiat's resuscitation following the ignominy of a 30-year hiatus. It's no coincidence that the model shares its name with Fiat's biggest US hit, the original 124 Spider, having enjoyed an almost two-decade production run following its launch in 1966. That car, along with the similarly long-lived Alfa Romeo Spider, helped to establish Italy's reputation for building pretty open-top sports cars. But they didn't perfect the idea, and nor did they manage to sustain their success much beyond the 1990s. Instead, Mazda resurrected the Roadster as a real sales force, shifting a million MX-5s globally while cars like the Fiat Barchetta and Alfa Romeo Spider eventually wilted on the vine. So who better for Fiat to partner up with than the Japanese firm when it came looking for someone to share the cost of producing a bespoke rear-drive platform a decade later? Fiat, although it was almost alpha, gets to use its own engines and homage-happy body while gaining space on the Hiroshima production line to account for the volume. The catch, of course, is that, much like the Toyota GT86/Subaru BRZ conundrum, the 124 has to prove to buyers that it isn't merely a shadow of the latest MX-5 but a distinct and credible product in its own right. Time to rule on whether Turin's good idea has made it to the road. Visually, no one will be mistaking a 124 Spider for an MX-5. Despite extensive similarities both underneath and inside, the two share not a single body panel. Even the proportions differ slightly, with bigger overhangs making the Italian noticeably longer than its Japanese counterpart. The design is Fiat's own, and while its relationship with the Pininfarina penned ancestor is not explicit in the way the 500 relates to the Nuova 500, certain features, particularly the swallowtail rear wings, are clearly intended as a tribute to the vintage model. Whether or not this equates to bona fide sports car comeliness is up for subjective debate, but for what it's worth, no autocar tester was convinced either of its objective prettiness or by Fiat's attempt to graft retro features onto a design apparently not comfortable with itself from the outset. But one thing is for sure, the larger overhang that gives a slightly more substantial front end to the 124 is also one of the factors implicated in the undoing of the platform's previously perfect 50-50 weight distribution. Fiat's claim to the lightest MX-5's 1,050 kg curb weight is already somewhat spurious. After all, along with additional bodywork, the 124 gets more kit and has a turbocharger strapped to its engine. And while the 1,125 kilograms measured on our scales is hardly contemptible, there's no doubt that a significant majority of it, -55%, now sits over the Roadster's nose. The decision to adopt forced induction is clearly the model's other substantial alteration. In place of the naturally aspirated 129 bhp 1.5 and 158 bhp 2.0-liter petrol motors deployed in the MX-5, the 124 gets Fiat's turbocharged 1.4-liter Mulchier unit in 138 bhp and 168 bhp configurations, the latter used exclusively in the Abarth version. Understanding that there is a sportier variant waiting in the wings is key to appreciating some of the choices made in the Spider's spec and chassis tuning. Like the lower-powered 1.5-liter MX-5, the 124 does not receive a limited slip differential on the back axle, and nor does it share the pricier Bilstein dampers made available to Fiat's tuning company. Its all-independent suspension, while reconfigured to Touring settings, is the same double wishbone and multi-link setup as that fitted to the Mazda, ditto the dual-pinion electric power steering rack. Most other mechanical things remain the same, too. Aside from different ratios, the 6-speed manual gearbox is a standard fixture. Again, an automatic is the preserve of the Abarth, as is the incredibly manual and equally splendid fabric roof. The car's steel platform remains unchanged, as does the use of aluminium in some of the body panels and engine frame, and all iterations are manufactured in Japan. The last time we drove a 124 Spider, we found its engine was wheezy towards the top end. But evidently this is an engine that loosens as it goes, because with almost twice as many miles on the odometer, around 2,000 of them, this example revved much more easily. That said, and it being a turbocharged unit, it still does its best work through the mid-range, which is unsurprising given that it develops its 138 bhp peak at only 5,000 revolutions per minute and its 177 pounds-foot from as little as 2,250 revolutions per minute. You don't wring it out like you would an MX-5. Instead, there's urge from 2,000 revolutions per minute, but not below, where there's also some appealing induction noise, which is replaced by conventional mechanical racket by 4,500 revolutions per minute. Curiously, it's not unlike an old Ford cant engine in its note. But even in this freer revving form, there's no point hanging on to the last 750 revolutions per minute. Despite what looks like, on paper, a paucity of power, the figures it produces aren't too shabby. The 124 will reach 60 miles per hour from rest in 7.3 seconds, despite needing 2 gear shifts on the way. For that, you can thank decent traction that allows a 0 to 30 miles per hour time of 2.5 seconds, more than half a second quicker than most front-drive hot hatches. With only one tester aboard and with very little fuel in, we suspect the 124 would be able to dip into the high 6-second bracket for the standing start, which would give it near parity with a 200 bhp hot hatch, although it's the traction deficit of the front driver that shines the Fiat in such a theoretically good light. Response is generally good. Clearly the turbo isn't being asked to work too hard, because there's little lag, and there's no audible giveaway that this is a blown unit. It drives through a fine 6-speed gearbox, too, with a clean, positive shift action and such nicely matched ratios that there are few cars in production in which it's easier to perform heel and toe downshifts. The 124 also brakes well, with good pedal feel and short stopping distances.